Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2024 action film, The Beekeeper. Now, The Beekeeper is not one of those films that I would say is great. It doesn't reinvent the action genre, but it's a fun watch. It's honestly what I expected it was going to be going in. I just wanted a fun, relatively no frills action movie starring Jason Statham doing what he does best, being a man of few words and a man who speaks with his fists or with his feet or with explosions. And that's exactly what the Beekeeper provides. I think the criticism that I've seen this film get for being derivative and not being 100% original, I think is honestly a bit harsh considering this is an action film. And it's an action film that stars Jason Statham. And it's just one of those action movies where it's a guy who's really talented at killing people, comes out of retirement, and gets revenge. That's what this movie is. It's a plot that's been done before, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad formula. It doesn't mean the film sucks just because it has a plot that's been done before in this particular genre. I mean, this genre in particular, or this subgenre of action films, there's been so many of them that there really isn't a way to make a plot that is 100% original and unique in the first place. So for me, the success of a film like this comes down to whether or not it's fun to watch, whether or not it's entertaining, whether or not it has some good, exciting action sequences. And for the most part, I think The Beekeeper is a success when it comes to those elements of the film. The direction by David Ayer, it's not what I would consider to be awesome or awe-inspiring. I definitely feel he's done better work, even in films like Bright, for instance, but it's good enough. I think when it comes to the fight scenes, they are shot in a way where you definitely get that visceral punch to them. It doesn't necessarily rely too much upon gimmicks like quick cut editing or shaky cam, which I definitely did appreciate. There are some scenes though where the way that they're shot is a little too comical for my tastes, where it's shot in a way where I don't know if it's deliberately over the top, but the way that it's shot is just unintentionally funny. And I don't really think that that's necessarily the right vibe for some of these scenes. Also, a lot of this film is just shot in a way where it's way too dark. I don't know what Ayer was doing with his lighting, but there's so many shots in this movie where it's really hard to see anything. So I don't understand why that happened. This isn't a movie that necessarily needed like neon bright colors and stuff, but there are a lot of scenes in this film where they're shot in these dark rooms or in these places that don't have a lot of light, and it just leads to scenes that look very murky and are very muddy looking. And a little bit better lighting definitely would have helped some of these scenes. Um, but overall, not a bad job. Decently directed, especially when it comes to the fights and when it comes to Statham in action, which is really what the main selling point is of this film in the first place. The screenplay, uh, by Kurt Wimmer, it's like I said, it's not going to win any awards, but it's serviceable. It's decent enough. I like the fact that it doesn't take that long to really get going. It starts out with Statham's character working as a beekeeper for this woman. She winds up getting her fortune stolen by these scammers. She takes her own life. Statham decides to go on a revenge spree after that and take out the scammers and go all the way to the top if he has to in order to get revenge. And along the way, there's these FBI agents that are hot on his trail, and there's corruption that's exposed that goes all the way up to the presidency, and goes to the top of the American government. And it's one of those things where, okay, all right, it's not going to have twists or surprises that are really going to throw you for a loop, but it works. It's a tired and true formula of some sort of former secret agent or special ops guy who comes out of retirement to kick ass and take names for personal reasons, but it's a common formula for a reason, because it's a formula that works. It creates a fun, exciting action film. You don't even necessarily have to be that complicated sometimes. Just have a template for a badass to do badass things. And that's what you have with the Beekeeper. I know I've seen a lot of people compare this to John Wick. I can kind of get that because of the fact that you have the son of a powerful figure who is being the target of the action star. Uh, this time around, it's Derek Danforth, and he's the target of Clay, just like the mobster son was the target of John Wick. But John Wick didn't invent that aspect of screenwriting in the first place. So I'm not going to knock this script for having that element in it because John Wick did it. I'm just not. Um I will say this, John Wick is a much better movie than The Beekeeper, but I don't think it's a fair fight to compare this with John Wick when it comes to the entirety of the film as a whole. But this is still fine. This still works decently enough. I like the idea of Statham and him being a beekeeper. That's different. I like that the beekeeper thing is also tied into his past and this shadowy agency that he was once a part of. I think the script could have done a little bit more with that, though. Delved a little bit more into the origins or the lore of the beekeepers. I think that's definitely something that leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to the screenplay. Um, I would have liked to have seen more focus on that, or more focus on Clay and who he is, than necessarily any of the stuff dealing with the FBI agents. Because that was just pretty bad, to be honest. To me, that was the weakest part of the script, other than the weak villain, is these FBI agents. Verona Parker and Bobby Naderi, who played Matt Wiley. So yeah, Agent Wiley and Parker. Might as well be Agent Wiley and Beeper or Roadrunner. It's that same sort of thing. They're comic relief, but for the most part, they're not funny. And it doesn't even seem like they really add that much to the plot. They do have a part when it comes to revealing the corruption and Derek's connection to the president. But other than that, they're pretty useless. And even that is something that you could just reveal with Statham saying a line of dialogue when he finds a computer that has a photo of Danforth with the president. You just have him go, he's with the president. You could just have something like that, He's the president's son. I guess I'm going to have to go kill the queen. Like, just something like that. You don't even necessarily need to have these FBI agents there to uncover the corruption. I know one of them, Verona, is the daughter of the caretaker lady, um, Eloise Parker, who befriended Adam, but still not needed. You could just have the only connection between Adam and a Parker being Eloise. You don't have to involve her daughter into things. And the other element of the script that is kind of weak is the villain. I appreciate a different approach to the villain, making him, your typical sort of influencer type who's in over his head, but you don't have an intimidating, strong enough villain or guy who works with this Derek Danforth character to balance things out. So what you have is Statham going up against a very mid-tier, forgettable group of villains. And there's never really a point where you're like, oh man, like Adam Clay isn't going to be able to fight his way out of this one. Like you never really get that to that point. You never really have a villain other than maybe this one guy with a prosthetic leg who seems like he might be able to take Adam Clay. Um, so I think that was definitely a factor that was missing when it comes to this script. And also some of the fights, some of the action gets a little repetitive at times. Would have liked to have seen a little bit more brutality, a little bit more of an edge in some of these scenes, maybe a little bit more creativity in terms of the weaponry or the way that Adam Clay is dispatching some of these bad guys. But speaking of the bad guys, one of the best things about this script is that it puts a microscope and focuses on a scummy part of society that you really don't see films focus on that much, which is these individuals who take advantage of people and their gullibility and their age or their disability and take their money. These scammers, these scam artists, these folks who install these fake viruses on people's computer and set up call centers and just scam people out of their money. It was nice to see them be the focus in a film and in a screenplay, and it was so cathartic to see them get their asses kicked and to see them get their comeuppance. So I think the script did a good job in terms of making them the focus of Statham's revenge, because even though a lot of the way that these characters are written, they're very faceless, there's really not a lot to them depth wise, you still already hate them. You still already hate them. You still already want to see Statham finish his revenge tour and strangle these fuckers with their own PC cords, or just toss them into a river or light their scam call center on fire. Like it already is inherently a strong base of bad guys and villainy, because what they do is just so scummy and so despicable. So I think that was definitely a major selling point and a major strong element of this screenplay. And a big reason why the film works is because, yeah, it's a bit derivative and kind of generic at times, but when you have these villains that are so efficiently scummy, it makes it so it's all worth it in the end, because it's not like they don't get their comeuppance. They do, and then some. Even the Trevor Wallace looking guy, who was the one that you saw early on in the film, who uh, who stole Eloise's money. David Witts, who played Mickey Garnett. But yeah, it's just one of those screenplays that, yes, there's a lot of derivative elements. There's a lot of things about it that aren't completely fleshed out. There are things that are less than effective, but it still ultimately is good enough for this kind of film. And I also appreciated the fact that it wasn't preachy. There's no preachy politics here. There's no messages that are being shoved down your throat. So that was also something that was refreshing to see. The cast, I mean, Jason Statham, he still got it. He may be getting older, but the man still has charisma. The man can still carry a film. The man is still an absolute total badass that you 100% buy being a guy who can take on an army by himself. Like you totally buy it. And Statham is just so effortlessly cool in this that it really does wind up being one of his best roles in years. Emmy Raver-Lampman, though, as Verona Parker, she has all the charisma and screen presence of an actual lamp. The same thing goes for her partner, played by Bobby Naderi. The two of them were so out of place, and their performances were sitcom level quality, which is not what you want out of a feature film. Josh Hutcherson is Derek Danforth. He was a despicable little shit. I think he did a good job really providing those just annoying influencer vibes, but wasn't intimidating in the slightest. Was kind of laughable when he was involved in a situation where he's supposed to be some kind of threat. But I'm not going to blame Josh Hutcherson. I think he did a good job considering the role that he was given and what he was asked to do with it. Um, he played a character that you definitely did not like and you wanted to see get punched in the face. So I give him props for that. Jeremy Irons as Wallace Westworld, this guy who's an aide or somebody who's working with Derek to protect him. Jeremy Irons is hamming it up in this movie to an extreme. Almost reminded me of Dungeons and Dragons at times. But that kind of adds to the movie. It kind of adds to the entertainment factor. So it didn't bother me. Honestly, I was entertained by it. I enjoy Jeremy Irons' scenery chewing in this movie. Jemma Redgrave as the president is kind of there. Fine enough, I guess. So is Minnie Driver as the director, Howard. Phylicia Rashad, nice to see her again. Wasn't in it a lot, but made the best of it. I definitely did sympathize with her, especially when she goes along with these scammers and has her money stolen. And then when you find out that she wound up taking her own life because of it. Um, Enzo Clientele, Cilenti is Rico and Anzalone. That guy, I believe. Yeah, I think that was yeah, he was another, I forgot exactly what character that guy played. Is kind of there. David Witz, well, like I said earlier, Trevor Wallace's stunt double. uh, he was definitely somebody you wanted to see get punched in the throat or in the dick or tied to a truck and thrown into a river. Uh, really did embody like the worst aspects of these scummy scam artists perfectly. And yeah, there were some other actors who played some of some of the guys who were going up against Adam Clay, and they were fine. Um, but yeah, overall, not a terrible cast, but definitely the biggest headliner and the one that stands out the most is Jason Statham, closely followed by a scenery chewing Jeremy Irons. The cinematography by Gabriel Bearstein. It's not a stain on cinema, but yeah, it tends to be kind of bland at times. But it's not something that I would say is worth a lot of buzz, but it works competently enough when it comes to the film as a whole. Feel the same way about the editing by Jeffrey O'Brien. Um, it doesn't always hit the sweet spot, but it hits it enough times that it's an editing job that overall is effective enough, especially when it comes to some of the fight scenes, some of the action. in the film. The music by David Sardi and Jared Michael Fry. Very forgettable. Really not a lot of variety with the notes. Kind of just drones on. Doesn't add a lot to the film except like the bare minimum. That's definitely one of the weaker aspects of the film, other than some aspects of the script and some of the performances, is the score or lack thereof. Um, and if you ask me, it went by at a pretty good pace. It's 105 minutes. That's with the end credits. You take the end credits out, it's not that long, and I did appreciate that it really wasn't too tedious, wasn't too slow in terms of building certain plot elements. There were a decent amount of action scenes and fights that were thrown in there, and yeah, it really had a good pace to it for the most part. I was never really bored while I was watching the movie. Um, in a lot of ways, at the end of the day, The Beekeeper reminded me of a old school Chuck Norris or Steven Seagal movie, where you got a star who's charismatic, who has a screen presence, who's known for being an action star, and they're just given a platform to just kick ass. That's really what The Beekeeper reminded me of. Yes, there were other Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal films in their prime that I felt were better and ultimately more entertaining overall than The Beekeeper, because at times, the derivative nature of it was definitely something that held the film back. But overall, I still had mostly fun with it. So I would say, if you enjoy that kind of film, definitely give it a watch, especially if you're a fan of Jason Statham. If you're a fan of Jason Statham, I'm pretty sure you already saw this. And I'm glad that it's making some profit at the box office. I think it's got 70 something million dollars worldwide. It definitely didn't cost that much to make. So I'm glad that it's doing all right. And yeah, this is the best film Statham has starred in years. So if he can keep it up, if he can do films like this in the future, I'm all for it. Like I would definitely love to see Statham star in fun, no frills, pretentious, free action movies where the focus of the film is the star and his actions. I think that's honestly some of the best action films in general. Really, John Wick, the trilogy is at its best when it's just focusing on John Wick and what he does, not some overly complicated plot or any of this other pretentious nonsense about samurai code and so on and so forth. Um, so yeah, I would definitely recommend this one. I would say it's, out of the two films that I've seen this year so far, it's definitely the best one. And I wouldn't be surprised if it still winds up on my best list at the end of the year, because I had that much fun with it. I got to be honest. Um, so yeah, that's my thoughts and my review of The Beekeeper. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.